And we will begin our education committee meeting of the school board. And we appreciate all of those in attendance. Before we actually get started, as you can see, we have a very full agenda, but I wanted to acknowledge the National Education Week, and to take this opportunity to thank all of our educators and those who support the work of our educators in the William Penn School District. Just wanted to let you know that we appreciate all that you do to educate and support our students, our families, and our community. So again, I say thank you. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn the agenda over to Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Cook-Henry. Thank you for your warm words of encouragement and kindness towards our teachers and staff of the William Penn School District. The order of our agenda for this evening, we will have a Lakeside and EBS update. We'll have a secondary course pathway project update. We'll have a summer enrichment programs update by Dr. Lewis, and then we'll have our special education audit updates as well. Moving forward with our first item on the agenda, I'm going to move straight into our presentation, and Danielle and Gina.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's feeling okay today. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I'm gonna try to make it through without coughing. So think happy thoughts for me. Okay, so this year, our partnership with Lakeside, and I'm going to speak on Lakeside, we are continuing with our intervention team coordination model that we created last year. As you can see, the image that you have on the screen is that model, and it lays out everybody's role as we move forward with interventions with students who require some additional support. And so you see the Lakeside box there, and coordination with the counselor and social worker, principals and teachers, and EBS. They are all working together and coordinated to make sure that each person on this team knows what the other is doing, and we're making sure that we're hitting every student that needs our support. Next slide. Okay, alrighty. So this year, our model with Lakeside in terms of the staffing, we retained 3 neurologic student support counselors at the secondary level, at the middle school, the 9th grade academy, and the high school. So in summary, they work with our intervention staff, counselors, social workers, and EBS staff, and support them through the trauma-informed methodologies that we began last year. Also, beginning on the 21st, the Lakeside team developed a community circle model, seeing a need for young people who were coming to them, expressing issues and concerns around community violence, grief, and just generally what it's like to be a young person. And so they started these groups with students to talk about how they're feeling, and to talk about ways that they think they can help with their community to improve what's going on around violence and grief. Next slide. So here I just provided some bullet points from each one of the Lakeside staff that are in our schools. I'm not going to read the whole slide for you, but I'm really excited about the work they're doing. I would like to share that I also recently, the day before yesterday, had them take part in our meeting with our social workers, so that there was some cross collaboration there as well. Next slide. Here you see what Miss Cooper is doing at our 9th grade academy. And she's very excited about the the groups that she's doing and the mindful moments that she's implemented for morning announcements, inviting students and staff to participate in breathing exercises. Again, this trauma-informed approach to, getting our students ready to learn in the morning. Next slide. And then here you see what Ms. Martin has been doing with her students at the Green Avenue campus, and providing brain-based counseling and interventions to over 130 students so far. Again, I'm really happy about the work that they're doing in collaboration with the counseling staff and social work staff. So that's what we have there. Next slide. So the other part of our contract with Lakeside this year is to continue the professional development. And so here you see, and there's a link in the presentation of these 10 asynchronous videos that have been developed just for us. And I would like to highlight the supporting middle school girls, because this came out of a need expressed by our counselors at the middle school saying, we really need some help around young ladies at the middle school level. And so in talking and collaborating with the Lakeside staff, they developed a video for them, which they're using. I also want to share that we do have upcoming in-person workshops on December 14th as a part of our induction sessions through HR. So next slide. Oh, and now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Gina.
Thanks, Ms. Seward. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the maintenance of our contract for our emotional support programs, our supplemental emotional support programs with EBS. You will see the Stepping Stones group, because the EBS Healthcare was purchased by the Stepping Stones group last year. So we continue to have our district-wide staff through the EBS Stepping Stones collaboration. We have a district-wide supervisor, behavior support consultant, board certified behavior analyst, and registered behavior interventionist. They continue to provide the coordinated early intervening services throughout the district by supporting intervention meetings. In addition to that, they are continuing to support our supplemental emotional support programs at the elementary level, at Walnut, the middle level, at Penwood Middle School, and then they have staff for emotional support at the 9th grade academy and also at the Green Avenue campus. We are working on our overarching goals of attendance, graduation rate, and collecting data to determine whether or not there is improvement or growth in the emotional support program for those students. So we'll talk a little bit more about our attendance and graduation rates as it applies to our cyclical monitoring audit and those areas. But that's some information on the EBS Stepping Stones program.
Okay, thank you, ladies. At this time, do we have any questions around EBS and Lakeside?
Jennifer Hoff.
Thank you. I know Lakeside was paid for with ESSER funds. Are we able to continue with them past June of 2023?
I'm glad you brought that up, Jennifer, because that was going to be my comment. We will be talking about this at budget time. The funding is only through June of 2023.
Okay, thank you so much. And so child has a mental health issue when they come into school. Are they able to see someone immediately? And it's past the guidance counselor, right? It's not, on impact, you can clearly see it's past the guidance counselor. So in the high school, 9th grade, and the middle school and elementary, is that access available to our students? And is it different who they see in any given building, or is there some sort of protocol?
Since we have principals on this Zoom, I think that would be a great opportunity for them to address what actually happens in real time.
Sure. Excuse me, I can address it from the middle school perspective.
middle schools, is a great mixture of kind of challenges that students have. There's a lot of developmental stuff that's going on. So it really kind of depends on, to answer your question, yes, they have immediate access to someone if they're in a mental health crisis. It really just depends on the student and the level of relationship. So a lot of students will gravitate towards Mr. Farrell, right, who is our Lakeside mental health person. There are students that have great relationships with Miss Andrews, who is our EBS therapeutic provider. The guidance counselors obviously have deep and robust relationships with a lot of our students. So it can look different depending on who the student is, but nonetheless, students have direct access to address their concerns as soon as they present them.
And I would say that same thing at the 9th grade academy. We have, and I sort of echo what Dr. B. Coates said in terms of keeping this service moving forward, because it's really important and really impactful for our students. We have an EBS person who typically deals with our students with special education, emotionally disturbance. And then we also have the Lakeside who deals with our, the general education students who need support. Then we also have a counselor as well. So we have 3 different individuals in the building that can support students in their mental health. And we have a social worker as well. So it's really has made a difference, especially with, coming off of the pandemic and everything students have been experiencing. These services have really been beneficial to the 9th grade academy.
Same at Penwood High School. So we have EBS, Lakeside, counselors, and social worker. Basically, we are the team to provide efficient and effective services when our students present their mental health issues. So students and parents have been sharing that they are very satisfied with services that we provide.
I would also like to add, Ms. Hoff, that there's the SAP program, Student Assistance Program through Holcomb. So if there looks or seems to be a need greater than what can be offered through school-based services, then they are referred to Holcomb for a SAP assessment, and then through that provided information on outside resources.
Would they be the ones supplying the information to the parents about MTSS? Or any county-based services to help?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Ms.
It would either be through the counselor or mainly the social worker. They're the ones that connect families to community-based resources around mental health and behavioral health.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I wanted to add that the first slide where the diagram was there for Lakeside EBS, the VIN on what we do and how we're linked, it's also linked inside of your presentations, and you can see the full view. All of our documents are pretty much linked and embedded throughout our presentation this evening. For example, the secondary course pathway, you will see some items that say linked. I will not click on each item, but you could click on it for later review. Okay, Mr. Dunn, can you lead us with the team for secondary course pathway?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Edward Dunn. I'm the supervisor of curriculum supports out of the Office of Academic Services. And tonight we'll be talking about the secondary course pathway project. I'm sure you've heard some things, information about it in the past, so we want to give you an update as to where we are currently. Supporting me in this work is a cross-functional team of leaders, teachers, community members in this process. And chairing our subcommittees are our 3 secondary principals, Dr. Lee, Mr. Curry, and Mr. Denenza. So just to connect this to the why of what we're doing, I want to highlight our strategic plan. So we look at priority 3, overarching goal 4, specifically action strategy 1. You can see there that it outlines that the district will review and modify specifically programmatic offerings in the high school course selection guide in order to ensure its alignment with post-secondary education standards. So that is the main focus of this particular project. We can continue forward. So just to give you a quick snapshot of what the Secondary Course Pathway Project Committee is, once again, it's aligned to that strategic goal. And our objective is to develop a recommendation for the folks here, as well as the community, to approve so that we can begin rolling out this new pathway for students in September of 2023. So to go back a little bit into the past, we've been planning and working towards this for, I would say, over a year, probably closer to 15 to 18 months. But the formalized process started in the spring of 2022 with our phase 1. And really what we did was we met with high school leadership that included all of the folks on the admin team, as well as the department chairs, as well as central administration staff, special education, student services, every department, and started to talk about, okay, what is our strengths and weaknesses and what are our goals of this process? And then using those goals, how do we build a timeline to get to where we want? Over this past summer, we began phase 2, and phase 2, which I like to call the fun part, was our research and development team. So they got a chance to talk to other districts, read work. We had debates and conversations and built a whole bunch of ideas of things that we would love to bring to our students as a result of what our goals were. And so we completed that work this summer. And as you can see in this document, there are links if you want to kind of dive deeper into like what some of those proposals and those timelines look like. You can see some of that information. We can go to the next slide. So that brings us to phase 3, where we currently are. So right now, what we're doing is we're taking all of those great ideas that were produced by staff and folks this summer and looking at, okay, making some final decisions of what we can do and what we can't do, how it aligns with our current course catalog, what is logistically possible. And a big part of that is what will be the scheduling and staffing ramifications of whatever recommendations that we will make. And our plan is to essentially present the final product. And so I got a chance to sit in on a subcommittee meeting today. It was really cool. We had, like I said, some internal staff, but we also had some external stakeholders, some folks that we were working on some that are grant partners with us. We also had a student that contributed a whole lot today and asked some really cool questions that were helpful for this process. But to make a long story short, over the next month or so, as you can see by the dates, we'll be conducting these subcommittee meetings to present our final product. And hopefully we'll be able to get approval and voting on any new courses that we may be rolling out. And then that takes us into phase 4, which will begin in a brand new calendar year, which is essentially doing all of the legwork to get that new course catalog off of the ground. So that means pushing it out to students, communicating with families and new expectations, any professional development that we need to do of teachers, any resourcing that we need to do. So for example, if we are starting a new course, we making sure that we have the curriculum and textbooks or whatever the case may be necessary. And so that process will take place from January to May, with hopes of launching our first portion of that process, or our product, I should say, in September 23. I do want to offer a small caveat because of the scale of the changes that we're making. Not every single part of the plan will go into effect in September 23. Some things will have to be phased over time because it is a pathway. So for example, and we're still in our finalization process, so I'm just giving an example, but let's say we said, hey, we want to offer an AP computer science class, right? We can't offer that necessarily in September 2023 because we would have to offer the prerequisite courses so that kids could get on that pathway to eventually get to AP computer science. So that's what I mean by that phased approach. Another part of this, as we're looking at our new slide, we're also going to be including our elementary folks in this process as well. So this is a K-12 review. So taking a look at, okay, what role should elementary playing in exposing kids to career pathways? Do we want to offer some themed courses or opportunities? Maybe they're not formalized courses, maybe there's programming. Do we want to get kids exposed to coding and STEM or education or some of the other pathways that we've developed on the secondary level? How can we get kids exposed to that earlier. And so where we are currently in that process is we are recruiting folks to participate on this team. So if there's any folks in the audience that are interested in applying, you can utilize that QR code, but we can also obviously share out the link if that's easier to sign up. And those meetings will be starting in the new calendar year. We can actually go to the next slide. So in winter of 2023, which is starting, well, like I said, we're recruiting right now to start our formalized meetings in January, where we're going to go through that same process. Obviously, it's not going to be as large because secondary is so diverse in the way courses are structured, and it's much more complex. So it's really only 2 phases. It's really pulling folks together, doing that same analysis of strengths and weaknesses and goals, researching best practices, and then making a recommendation to the board by the end of the spring so that we can begin what portions of this process are appropriate in September of 2023. So we'll stop for a second if we can go to the next slide and take any questions. I also have my subcommittee chairs here as well. So if you have any specific questions about how this will play out at any of our buildings, we can collaborate to answer some of those questions.
Ms. Ivory has her hand up. Good evening, Ms. Ivory.
Good evening, everyone. I just had a question with Delaware County Community College. When we attended the event where they rolled out their plan for opening up the new location, one of the highlights that they made was that school districts were able to present a plan to Delaware County Community College for specific programs that they felt they needed. Have we included that thought process in submitting a proposal for a particular program to maybe utilize Delaware County as a resource for that in one of the areas that you have listed?
Yeah, so I'll pass some of this question to Dr. Lee, but we already have a current relationship with Delaware Community College. And so part of our recommendation is thinking about what courses are we going to offer on campus versus what courses would be like dual enrollment style that will be taken at Delaware Community College. Also, as a part of our Ramp to STEM grant initiative, we're also in the process of saying what dual enrollment classes we can actually offer on campus, which is a new opportunity. So for example, today in our subcommittee, we talked about, hey, is there an opportunity to offer an advanced math course for seniors on campus that would be taught by a WPSD teacher that kids could get a college credit for without like the barrier of having to take an AP exam. So you think about a student that maybe wants to be a marketing major, right? Maybe AP calculus that isn't really appropriate for them, but they would want to still get a college credit. That's an opportunity that we can build into our pathways to create more diversity for the opportunities that we provide for students. But to make a long story short, yeah, we definitely want to involve all of our external partners, and we are underway with that with our Ramp to STEM initiative for that specific pathway. And I think we can grow that into even more areas and other content pathways.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The only other thing that I would add to what Ed said was that we know that the new campus is coming in Upper Darby. And I think that will also provide us with some new and unique opportunities, more so in the, I would call it, school to work pipeline, so that students are able to graduate with certifications that will allow them to become gainfully employed upon graduation or shortly thereafter. So I think we just have some great opportunities that are available, that will be available to us over the next probably 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. Oh, it's 4. It's going to take that long.
All right, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you guys for your time, and we're really excited about presenting our final project to you guys. This has been a labor of love for me. It's been a long process, and I really appreciate my subcommittee folks that have been walking through this the whole time, as well as our leadership team here at the central office to work through this, because we essentially had to craft the process for us because it's something that we've never done before. So I want to really appreciate all the folks, the teachers, community members, like I said, our team here for supporting this work, because I think it's really, really important. It's going to prepare us to be a flagship school district in the area and even on the state level. So I'm really excited about sharing our final product with you guys.
Mr. Dunn, we're very excited about it as well, and we're looking forward to hearing more about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. I wanted to inform everyone, Mr. Dunn and Ms. Tokley are doing a double duty right now. They're at Ardmore's math night. So they're both presenting and helping over there. So they're actually in someone's office taking the time to join us this evening. So I wanted to give them a shameless plug. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
So now we'll move over to summer enrichment programs, and the summer enrichment program sheet before we go over is the actual link to what we offered this summer in case you may have forgotten, but we'll go right into our presentation.
Good evening, everybody. So as Tyra said, I'm going to be talking through some of our current reflections about how things went over the summer and what we learned and how that's informing planning for future summer programming. Overall, the vision is that we have programs that are supporting our overall district goals and also offering students, things that they're excited about, offering families things that they're excited about, and offer ways for us to improve a little bit every year. So I'll be talking about those themes tonight. So overall, the attendance to these programs was very strong. We had a ton of registrations, 714 in total, and 616 registered students attended at least once. So that means we had about 100 students who registered for the program and then decided to do something else with their summer, didn't ultimately attend. But we were sort of keeping track of both registration and attendance, so we understood sort of what that drop-off is, which will help us plan in the future for, okay, this is how many students signed up, so maybe we'll have another similar size drop-off again when it comes to planning, staffing, and programming and things like that. About 67% of all registered students attended most days of the program, so there's that second kind of drop-off of maybe some students went the first week, but then kind of tapered off, decided to do something else. Of course, the programs are absolutely, optional, voluntary, they're enrichment programs. So some students do decide that they're not for them ultimately. When we think about average daily attendance at each of the programs, that was also strong. So among the elementary programs, that was between 83 and 89%. Middle School Bridge had even higher average daily attendance, and High School Bridge at 72% daily attendance. So all of these programs were, having their kids show up almost, most of the time. And we've got another look at that at the next slide. So we can go to the next one with the graph. So this just kind of adds some more detail to this. In all the programs, about 2/3 of the students or more attended at least half of the time. So to remind everybody, so this is 5 weeks off on Fridays and off the 4th of July. So these are 19 days at camp, and often, I believe every camp had like a trip day once a week. So that's why less than 10 days means you're there less than half the time of a total 19-day program. And we have a bunch of students who are attending every day. So that's also really exciting. So we can go to the next one. Okay, so we were able to contact families directly with some satisfaction surveys. We had 89 responses, and the overall, satisfaction of the families was very high. So one of the things we were interested in these first two bullet points is how they thought about the balance between academics and trips and fun stuff, right? So these are summer enrichment programs. We'd like there to be an academic impact, but we also recognize that fun, exciting activities kind of programming in the summer is a key part of the draw. So we were interested in how do families think about that balance? And a large majority of the families said that the balance was good. So 74% said the amount of trips and fun stuff was just right. 80% said the amount of academics was just right. And 91% of families said that their child enjoyed the program most of the time or almost all the time. We also asked a number of other questions about barriers with transportation, how they felt about pickup and drop-off procedures. Those aren't reported here, but that's going to inform our planning for next summer and kind of our advice for programs or our expectations for programs. we can go to the next. Okay. So as I kind of alluded to, there are some challenges when it comes to assessing the academic impact. One of the key ones is that the program is pretty short, right? So it's 19 days at the camp, maybe 15 days if we take out the trip days. So with that short program, we were trying to use some of our available assessment tools, which are really more designed for use in a single school year or in a particular grade. So we can kind of massage the data past that and work with, for example, scale scores instead of performance bands, and kind of look at the measures that are available to make some comparisons. And those kind of comparisons are informing planning for next year. Overall, we're trying to, in the future, kind of make sure that there's an alignment between the scope of the program, given its length, and the capacities of our assessment tools. And I have an example next of some of the kinds of challenges and some of the data that we are able to look at on the next slide. So this is an example finding that illustrates some of the positive signs we're seeing, and also some of the challenges and opportunities to refine the analysis in the future. So there were some possible strengths in ELA among rising kindergartners who attended these camps. There were 20 kindergartners who attended Camp Rock. That was the only program that was open to rising K. In the K through 6 years, as most of the audience is familiar, we administer the Acadience reading. It's a reading benchmark test. And in these camp attending kindergartners, 65% scored at or above benchmark on the fall Acadience reading assessment. So they look like they're in a good spot, compared to only 44% among non-attending students. So this is a good sign. This might be saying, you know, our kindergartners who went to summer do have this measurable leg up when they start the school year, which is exciting. But we can't rule out the possibility that those 20 students were maybe in a stronger spot to begin with. So this illustrates, you know, the opportunity to use more sensitive measurements of growth over the course of the program over that short period, so that we can really understand the strengths of each program, the unique offerings of each program, maybe the different impact in different grades. So those are the things we're trying to look at for, you know, future assessments of summer programs. So I'm happy to take questions about that and see if there's anything else we can discuss. I see, yeah, Ms. Hoff.
I appreciate the transparency regarding sometimes what gets in our way of seeing if programs work. I appreciate that a lot. Anecdotally, was transportation an issue?
We didn't see a lot of reports about transportation issues, so I'm working from memory here, but one of the things that we asked was, how often did your child not make it to the camp because you couldn't find transportation? And it was a very small percentage of folks who had like several instances of that. So that tells us that whatever the transportation offerings were, almost all families were making it work. I believe we also asked how they got to the programs, right? So like by car, by public transit. Car was by far the most common. So yeah, it leads us to think that transportation was pretty adequate. But there, you know, if in the future, we know we want to keep an eye on that, because if in the future we might change the site of the program, just hypothetically, you know, that might really shake up everybody's transportation situation. So even though we got a pretty good feedback about transportation, it's something we'd want to keep watching closely.
Yeah, I would encourage Dr. B. Coates to add that to the budget, because it could have been a barrier for those that didn't apply. Right? If you know there's no transportation and you can't figure that out, you're not gonna, and sometimes those are our most children that would benefit from it the most. And also, I wondered if you surveyed those 100 that did not show up.
Yeah, that's an excellent point and an excellent question. So for the transportation, yes. So you're correct that we surveyed. Well, so I can answer both your questions at once. So we sent the survey to every family email address that was provided at registration. So we thought maybe we'll get some people who will answer the survey, even though their child never attended, and we would ask them, what happened? Did you decide to attend something else? Were there different barriers? I believe, unfortunately, we only got like 2 responses from people who didn't attend. So they were very gracious with their time. They answered our survey about a program they did not attend. But you're right that when we survey attending families, we're getting those who attended, right? We don't know how many people just never signed up because of a barrier like transportation.
I wonder if next year we could do at least some of the survey via smartphone. Because we don't prove to have great response via email. It sort of self-selects.
Yes, we could have the capacity to text surveys. Yes, some survey platforms allow for that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I think I do see a hand up. Are we at a
Yes.
where we're taking hands from attendees?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sophia Lewis. I have a question about the survey. Were there any relationship questions on the survey about the relationships between the teachers and the program in general?
So are you asking if there was a question asking families how the teachers' relationships with the programs were?
How the parents perceive the program and their relationships with the program, because that also is a key point of why someone would sign their students up for a program such as Camp Rock, and why their child would be able to achieve what they achieve because of the positive relationships. And that is a data point. So that's why I'm curious to know if that data point was included in the survey.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. We didn't ask for feedback about what you're discussing. I think we were trying to get kind of an overall sense of did they like the program? And when we ask those kinds of overall satisfaction questions, we can guess or we can assume kind of all the different factors that might go into that, but it's hard sometimes to break out like all the possible reasons why they might be happy with the program. I think you've certainly, named something that's going to be significant for a lot of families.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Lewis.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I do not see any other hands up.
Thank you. Now we'll move into Ms. Germana presenting the special education audit updates.
Hi, everyone. So on the slide just before this is a link to the 2020 DCIU Special Education Department audit. And I'm just going to remind you about the strengths, needs, and the recommendations that came from that audit. So you can see our strengths and needs, and what we're going to talk about tonight is the recommendations they made and where we moved on those recommendations. So they recommended we develop clearly defined systems, processes, and roles, and implementation of program goals and elements across buildings and grade levels. So through that process and and our strategic plan and restructuring, we can go over what changes and developments related to this audit. Can I have the next slide, please? So of those recommendations, the things developed in this in our strategic plan was taking a look at the organizational structure, putting together a multi-tiered system of support framework, looking at special education best practices and applying those to the William Penn School District, and professional development that would be needed for the development of these areas. So for organizational structure, you may know that we now have an Office of Academic Services, which encompasses curriculum and instruction as well as special education services. So this is kind of progressive, I think, and groundbreaking for our district, because most districts either have a special education department or they go under student services. This format and this, I think, forward-facing goal of putting special education services as part of academic services puts the focus of special education on instruction, keeps the focus of all students, our general education students. All students should be educated the same. Some receive special education services. So that was the first step in, I think, moving towards the direction that we're moving here in our district. And the second piece was creating a position where there's a manager of those special education services and of compliance. So they're focusing on the delivery of those services rather than the department, and focusing on compliant IEPs and, you know, focusing on the IDEA regulations of compliance. Another exciting feature of the audit, or I guess brought it back into light, was the development of a multi-tiered system of support. So in this, a multi-tiered system of support framework was started, and that's part of our strategic plan. The Office of Academic Services, combined with the Student Services Department, created a framework and timeline throughout, you know, our 5-year focus forward plan. And where we are right now in that process is we've developed standardized assessments, both academic and behavioral, and those are being implemented to students. We've developed a system of looking at those assessments, data-driven instruction is happening, data meetings are happening in our buildings, and we are looking at whole student groups rather than portioning them out based on the services that they get. So it's pretty exciting to see. And then the next part of this, the next step, is those tiered interventions. And through that data and through the general education and special education working together, we can look at all students, whether they receive services yet or not, and determine what kind of interventions and support they need in hopes to preventing students from requiring specially designed instruction through special education. So the way that we do it here at William Penn, the William Penn way, as we call it, and it's super exciting, is, you know, there's a inclusion, which is a buzzword in special education, but for William Penn School District, our inclusion model, based on our resources, staffing, we developed a core plus more service and support continuum. So in that continuum, students, we can look at students, see where they fall in the services that they need, and provide the services they need. So if you think about a co-teaching model, another buzzword, co-teaching, that's great when you have, not to say we don't have the staff, but it just requires a different structure of the department. So for this, there's a collaborative model and a service model. So some students, they don't need to be pulled out. What was happening in the past was, because there wasn't a focus on instruction, students were pulled out for English and reading and math. They're never receiving that core. We're never closing that achievement gap because they're never hearing core. They're getting 90 minutes of an alternative curriculum. Well, in this continuum model, students are in that core content area. They're getting core, and they're either being pulled during small group and receiving research-based interventions another time throughout the day, or they remain in their core with specially designed instruction and accommodations. And I'm looking at Mr. Denenza because the middle school developed a great schedule this year, block scheduling, same old thing, block scheduling, but they are really focused on utilizing the special education staff and general education staff to pull apart the two halves of that block and giving students the support they need. So it's really exciting. I'm hoping we can use them as a model as we go forward in strengthening this model. So first, in public, I'd like to say thanks, Mr. Denenza, because it's been a pleasure working with you guys this year. But anyway, back to the presentation. And then ongoing professional development for this model. So whether it's supporting general education teachers on how to give these accommodations and actually differentiate for all the students in the classroom, and then really strategic interventions on our professional development on our research-based interventions that we have provided to our special education staff this year. So there's targeted research-based direct instruction happening outside of the classroom when we are pulling students, but we're only pulling at strategic times so that they can continue to get that core and continue to close that achievement gap. And then finally, I just said all of this, but our professional development. So another thing that we're doing is we're giving special education teachers dedicated quarterly time to talk about what is happening in the classrooms. So how are we supporting our general education teachers? Because that's just as important as supporting students. We have to change the mindset and support our teachers in how to give these interventions, academic behavior, things like that. So we're dedicating time quarterly in looking at the instructional goals that our teachers developed over the summer, and then quarterly instructional in the intellectual planning preparation protocols that they develop quarterly. We align our support to them. And then I talked on the earlier slide about the interventions in reading and math. We are super excited about our new autistic support program. It's the STAR program. This is a support plus a curriculum model that is aligned to the Pennsylvania alternate standards and support students who are taking the passes. So actually looking at Pennsylvania alternate standards and providing instruction that is aligned with that. So there's a lot of good stuff happening. And it really has come from that model and the vision of pushing special education services in and tying us together with curriculum and instruction. So that's that audit update. And then 2020 was a busy year for audits. We were in our cyclical monitoring for continuous improvement. Now this is an audit through the state looking at compliance. So we are in corrective action in 3 areas. The first area is graduation rate. And as you can see, the SPP is school performance profile target that's what that stands for the state, and our 4-year cohort graduation rate for special education students. So this is aligned really with our corrective action plan is aligned with the ATSI plan of the high school, because raising graduation rates raises it for everyone. But in the graphs, you'll see the 4-year cohort graduation rate and that dip. And then the 5-year cohort has gone up. And I feel that that could be what I've seen over the last couple years is that Act 66 and Act 55, where we've given students an additional year in school, that affects our 4-year cohort rate. So it's a great opportunity for families who believe their student or their children need another year of school. However, that does affect our 4-year graduation rate. And also because there's that need, or you were in VOTech and cosmetology and you missed time because of COVID or whatever, and you need that extra year in VOTech, we're seeing more students who aren't in low incidence autistic support or life skill support who are deferring an extra year. So while that's a great opportunity for our students, and I'm glad that we can offer that, it does affect our graduation rate. So it's a give and take. It's best for the student. It hurts our graduation rate. So we're just going to make sure others get our graduation rate up if a student decides to defer. Our dropout rate, we talked about earlier with EBS and SSG, the attendance rate. So attendance is directly related to dropout. So these are the dropout rates. There were not calculations from the state. So when this was provided in the fall to the state, these were calculations that we did on our own, and there weren't state calculations yet. But this is our dropout rate. 2021, we were pretty much, that was the hybrid year, so the dropout rate declined. And we do have a lower dropout rate of our calculation than we were. So we're seeing a less, we're seeing our dropout rate decline. So that's great. And we're just going to keep chipping away at it. The one thing that the high school did as part of ATSI is they've aligned assistant principals to grade levels, and they really work their students and their interventions. And I'm going to call it line item, but that's how I look at their spreadsheet that they use. That here's this student, this is the attendance, whether they receive services, whether they're ELL, whether they're an athlete, the contact that was made, the interventions that have been put in place. And I think that has a lot to do with the decline in the dropout rate as well. And finally, least restrictive environment. That is part of IDEA, that students should be educated in the regular education setting as much as they can. And so you can see the school performance profile target and our percentage. So what you see in pink is students who are in the gen ed classroom, 80% or more. We want that number to be up. We want students in the general education classroom receiving core content. And you can see the state and ours. So ours did go up. And then in the blue, that's students who were in the classroom less than 40% of the day. And really that would be more of our supplemental students, and our number's a little high on that. And I think our strategic plan and our focus on having students receive core, that is going to help both of those numbers. So it's another reason I'm excited. Students should be, in the general education environment receiving core content, and our push for that this year is going to help these numbers. And another thing is also professional development. Teachers or our special education teachers, not everyone was calculating those percentages correctly. So we, did professional development on how to calculate the percentages of students in the gen ed classroom and that. So we're very confident that our numbers are gonna be better. And finally, we don't have to go back, Ms. Brown, but our final results are due June 2024 to the state. So we're just going to keep working those 3 areas for the next year. And to touch on the summer enrichment, the special ed side of summer enrichment is extended school year services. So we had 425 students eligible for special education services through their IEP. 425 invitations and registration information was sent out. We had 159 students register and 148 students attend. Of those 148 students, at least 123 of those students attended 50% or more. And why that number is significant for us is we report progress to parents at the end of those 19 days. And unless you've attended 50%, we really can't report progress. So we look at that. That's one of our benchmark numbers for a student and the information we can provide to parents at the end of the session. And I think that might be it. Oh, no, one more thing. Okay, so special education enrollment, we've had so far, and they're coming in every day, 123 new special education student enrollments. And these are the disability areas of the students who have registered. unknown, you can see that that means either they've come from out of state and they don't have a Pennsylvania disability identification yet, or students that at the time of this, we haven't received any records. And I think that this is it. So does anyone have questions?
Ms. Hoff?
Yeah, so your 5 years versus 4 years, if a student, no matter what their situation, doesn't graduate in 4, the state dings us,
The
correct?
state dings us, yes.
I'm always, and not to throw Mr. Denens any shade, but I'm always curious when you go to block scheduling, what, and not for now, but what did you have to give up? Because, I heard from my advanced music students that there was no advanced music class. So I'm just curious what had to be, because you had to give up something to change scheduling. But I applaud you for doing it. I'm just curious, longer term, if there's things that were given up on the other side. And I had another question, but I didn't write it down, so I usually write them down.
Are there any other hands raised that I can't see? Okay.
I do not see any.
Are there any additional questions, concerns, anything for the good of the order? I want to thank everyone for ongoing updates, details that are moving us in the right direction. It's a lot of tedious work, but very important work. And so with that said, if there are no other questions or concerns, we'll leave on that note. I applaud you and continue to put your best foot forward as we are definitely changing, I believe, the trajectory of the William Penn School District. I'm very excited about what's happening in the classrooms and all of the work that's being done to support our Focus Forward 25 strategic plan. So thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.